There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. Thank you for all the warm, supportive comments about my dad. As a family, we have decided we're not going to speak publicly about my dad's condition or anything this soon, so stay tuned for an update in the coming weeks. But I do want to thank everybody for your warmth and kindness to me, and I also want to talk about that same warmth and kindness that we as a family are experiencing from friends and more extended family members and employers and so on. It's my students in Tokyo who I still teach on Zoom. It's just helped a lot. So going through difficult times like this, you sure appreciate the people you have in your life and the ways in which they show up and support you. So that has been absolutely wonderful. My reading has been definitely affected by what's going on, and there have been some days where I feel a sense of peace with where things are at. And the litmus test for how grounded I am and how at peace I am is, can I read or not? And so in the last few days, I have gotten my reading mojo back, and I haven't read for 5 hours a day or whatever, but I've certainly read for a couple hours a day and been able to fall into the books that I'm reading. So that's been wonderful. And there are other days where I can't even open a book because I'm just too preoccupied with everything going on. And that's just the way life is right now. And that's the way life is for all of us, I imagine, at various times. That is pretty much it for a personal check-in. And I am absolutely over the moon to now show you this week's mystery guest. And today's mystery guest is one of my favorite writers, Amina Kane, the author of my top read of 2022, In Delicacy, joining us from Los Angeles. Amina Kane, how wonderful to have you on as a mystery guest.
Hi, Sean. I'm really, really happy to be here and to be talking with you.
I was telling Amina offline that when I tried to talk about her novel, In Delicacy, which was published in 2020, I read it in 2022, I got so tongue-tied that I have a certain group of subscribers that when I'm trying to talk about a book that I love and I get all tongue-tied, they know to rush out and buy it because those are the ones that are especially worth reading. So In Delicacy was a really special read. I'm going to ask you, do I have everything you've written? I haven't read this, but I have I believe it's 2013 short story collection, Creature, and 2023 nonfiction kind of essayistic book on writing, A Horse at Night, which I loved as well. Absolutely. I haven't read Creature yet. Is there anything else out there that I don't have yet, Amina?
Yeah, my first book is called I Go to Some Hollow. It was a collection of short stories, but it's out of print. It's been out of print now for, I think, 11 or so years. Yeah, it was published by Langford Press, which used to exist here in Los Angeles. Langford doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, one other book. It's hard to get.
And so let's move into talking about, is there anything forthcoming? Anything at the press at the moment?
There's nothing at the press. I've been working on a novel for about, I think this summer will be 4 years. And my goal is to finish it sometime this summer. I don't know if I'll meet that goal or not. It's a book that I have kind of been working on like off and on again. When life gets busy, I have to kind of put it aside and then, I'll come back to it. And I've been working on it a bit the last few days. I just kind of immerse myself when I can. And luckily it's not that difficult for me to return to something. If a month or two has passed when I'm working on a book project, it'll actually start calling me back to it. I'll be doing something else and like a sentence will come into my mind and then I'll think, the book, I've been away from it too long. The book is calling me back. So it's been okay. I wish I had more sort of just dedicated time to it, where that's all I was doing. But it's a novel that, well, I guess like all of my fiction, not a lot happens in it, but there's a couple and they're spending the summer in a place that's a cross between the tropics and the Mediterranean. I tend to create settings out of places that I myself want to spend time in or can't stop thinking about. am a little bit self-indulgent in that way. But anyway, it's just this married couple. They're spending the summer there. They're trying to work while they're there. The narrator meets a friend, and that friend becomes kind of a big character too. And that's maybe all I'll say about it. There's a lot about pleasure in it. Probably like this is happening in all of my writing about closeness and friendship. But I'm also trying to write about love for the first time.
Ah,
And it's not a romance, like I wouldn't say that at all, but I'm trying to write about the love between this couple. Also because I've never done that before. I mean, I spent a lot of time, especially my first two story collections, writing about awkwardness and distance between people. And so I think at a certain point, I wanted to write about closeness and intimacy. And now I'm trying to tackle love. And also, I'm writing a male character with depth for the first time. So all of my male characters until now have tended to be on the flatter side, like the husbands that were mentioned, they're kind of like not great, so
maybe
um
in bed, if I remember correctly, from Indelicacy.
yeah. So that's also a first. I'm enjoying it a lot, like when I can work on it. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it flows more easily. But I don't have a title for it. I'll just say as the last thing, I've been working on it now for 4 years. No title. I have like a working title, but titles have become very, very difficult for me. So like A Horse at Night really didn't have a title for a long time, or it went through a bunch of bad titles. And Delicacy had one title, and then the publishers wanted me to change it, and it took me like a year to a year and a half to. So it's this. If I'm going to be done with the novel soon, I have to be able to title it.
Well, Indelicacy was a genius title, and obviously, I think I'm right. It's a word that you made up. It doesn't exist, and it's just a wonderful word.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like not used. Like it does exist, but it's just like so out of fashion at this point. And my husband actually helped me with it because I was struggling so much to find a title. And there's a line where Victoria says of herself, "How indelicate," and so he was like, "How about indelicacy?" He actually kind of is a help with my. He didn't help me with A Horse at Night, but with Creature he did because I thought creatures, and then he was like, "No, Creature." He's better at titles than I am.
Title advisor.
Yeah.
The setting of Indelicacy was kind of gauzy in the sense that it was difficult to pin down what historical era was it, present day or whatever. There weren't a lot of signals about that, which was, I think, something wonderful about it. Is that something is that kind of an Amina Kane thing, or just for that novel?
In terms of setting, it is. For a setting, I often combine like a real place with an imagined place with a place that exists but I haven't been to yet. So for Indelicacy, I was really thinking about Chicago, where I have like lived for about 8 years and was kind of missing. And then London, that a city I'd never been to when I started the novel. I did go after, like kind of midway through, and I've been again more recently. And then also just a made up place. So that's pretty, and then, as I was saying with this novel now, the setting is the combination of the tropics and the Mediterranean. But in terms of time, I think there are a couple of stories in Creature that I think have that more timeless feel, like they feel a bit old-fashioned, but then there might be some detail or object that is modern. And so I think I was doing that a bit in short stories and then really kind of did it in Indelicacy. And I wasn't sure at first how it would be received, what an editor would think of it or what readers would think of that. But I realized later, after I'd written it, that part of what I was trying to do was evoke a time period or different time periods through objects, because I wasn't writing a historical novel. It wasn't set in any one time, but just working with like the atmosphere of different time periods, and seeing what that feels like. I don't know, atmosphere is a big thing for me.
I didn't care what era it was set in. I was just so in love with the protagonist and her yearnings
Thank
to express herself, and her, there was things about her that were kind of funny too. There were so many levels to her, and her. I think my favorite thing about her was the time when she went. Didn't she go to a poetry reading? And I can't remember now exactly what happened, but she just uh, flew into a rage for about 10 seconds and told, I think it was the poet, off and was stomped out. And it was like, oh my God, you go, girl. I just, yeah, there's so many mentions to her.
Yeah.
So, yes, I agree. It was not a plot driven novel, but it sure did have its moments that were wonderful.
Well, good.
I find it fascinating that you're able to put a project kind of on the shelf and you don't have too much trouble getting back into it. Because I know I've heard a lot of writers say that that is really difficult for them. So, can you tell us maybe one or two other things that either come easily to you as a writer or that maybe you find difficult that lots of other writers don't? Or
I find it very difficult to begin something, to begin whether it's a book or a short story. And I think in a way it's why I moved from, one reason why I moved from writing short stories to novels is because I was kind of getting tired of starting things over and over again, especially because the process felt so torturous for me. And so it takes me a very long time to find a story or a novel. And when I say find, I mean, I start from a very empty place. Like I'm not an ideas driven writer. And so I have to sit down with the blank page and just sort of write and find my way into it, to the voice and the atmosphere and the mood and the setting. And so I think a lot of writers love the beginning time period, of writing a new book. But that to me is maybe my least favorite, because it's torturous and I end up doing all this writing that I don't keep, so like, yeah, I don't know what else. I don't know if there's anything. I mean, I think I'm probably unusual in that I don't begin with an idea.
you write about this in A Horse at Night, I'm sure. But so what do you begin with, or what typically comes to you? Is it an image or a snatch of conversation or
Yeah, I mean, it often is an image or a feeling or maybe a couple of objects or a setting. I'm so swept away by the books that I love. When I'm reading a book I love, I can get so swept away by it that, and this doesn't happen with all books that I love, but certain ones, I've started saying that they send me into a writing space, which means, it's just that feeling where for me, when I pick up a book and I love it so much and in a certain way that I both want to keep reading it and want to write because it just inspires me so much. And so I think sometimes just I don't know, the feeling of another book can send me into a writing space. If it's strong enough, that can even be the start of a book. I think with the novel I'm working on now, that in a way, what I started with was the feeling I got after reading two of my favorite writers, Clarice Lispector and Marguerite Duras. It's just the moods that they create, the sound, the narrative voices, in their works.
prime the pump?
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good segue into talking about Amina Kane as a reader. What have you been reading lately, or do you want to tell us about some of those books that have sent you to the blank page yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I have a couple of them sitting next to me. And speaking of moods, I've been kind of slowly reading these two books, Brian Dillon, Suppose a Sentence and Affinities. I don't know if you've read either one of these.
I have posed the sentence. It's beckoning to me. It'll be beckoning to me all the more after our conversation, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. And these two books are part of a trilogy. So Essayism is the third book. I've not read that one yet, but I haven't read either of these like cover to cover. I've been kind of letting myself dip into them. I mean, both of them are made up of shorter chapters or essays. This one, Affinities, I mean, Brian Dillon is basically writing about art and objects and images and artists that he's fascinated by. It's fascination that drives the book. The book feels like this constellation, of the things that he loves. And there's also like an image in a section, a bright stellate object, a small angled sphere. And there's like this image that goes along with it that is like a visual representation of what people see before they get a migraine. So it's like this, like I've never had a migraine, so I don't have experience with this, but he's also kind of fascinated just with like this depiction of the migraine and how it is or is not like what he's seen in his own field of vision, like when a migraine is coming on. And then it's interspersed with these essays, these very short essays on affinity. And so there are 10 of them. And in number nine is one of my favorites. Maybe I'll just read the first sentence. He says, a constant suspicion, unchanged since I was a student, that nothing I write pursues an argument or is built to convince. Instead, I simply get into a mood about the thing I am meant to be writing about and pursue that mood until it is exhausted or filled the space it was meant to fill. And he goes on to talk about, he says, so many dream states in which for a time not much else matters but the word, sound, or image at hand and what it seems to teach you. And I just relate to this a lot as a writer because I think I too like write to pursue moods in a way. And I'm also like very drawn to images. But it's great. I'm really enjoying it a lot. And then this book, Suppose a Sentence, each section of it starts with a sentence by a writer that he likes, so Anne Carson or James Baldwin, Joan Didion, Claire Louise Bennett, others. And he just allows himself to write into the mood of that sentence. And this idea of kind of writing until you've filled the space you were meant to fill with it. Like the sentence by Anne Carson that he writes about is very long, kind of winding, and it's just 2 pages, that he writes about it. And then there's a sentence from Villette, Charlotte Bronte, that's 3 words long, and that one's much, his chapter on that is much longer. So they're definitely meant, I think, to be read together. And now I need to read the third. But anyway, I really recommend them. I like them a lot.
So the second one, Suppose a Sentence, I could see that if you were going to pick and choose, you said you haven't read either one of them from cover to cover, but that you would maybe choose because the sentence appealed to you and to see what he had to say about it. How have you been picking and choosing from the other one? Do they have titles that kind of jump out at you, or how do you pick and choose from?
Yeah. There's like Dada, serious, beautiful scenic effects are produced, voracious oddity. Yeah, the titles are good. The titles do draw you in as well. And then another book I just thought I'd bring up is Vengeance is Mine by Marie Ndaye. This is translated from the French by Jordan Stump, who I believe has translated almost all of the translated works into English have been translated by him. I think I have one novel by her that was translated by another person. She's one of my favorite writers, and this book came out in 2023, this novel. Its subject matter is very dramatic. The protagonist is Maître Suzanne, who's a lawyer, and a man comes to her who she thinks she remembers from her childhood, like some pivotal, intense event, but she doesn't know if it's him, and he doesn't seem to remember her, and her own mother doesn't remember if it was him or another family, another son. But he's come to her, he's seeking her counsel because his wife has murdered their children. And the subject matter is very dramatic, but I think that Marie Ndaye is a great absurdist. I don't feel like anyone writes like her. And so that dramatic material is handled in an almost banal way. And then there's this other storyline. Suzanne has a housekeeper named Sharon who Suzanne is trying to help her with residency in France. The novel takes place in Bordeaux, and she needs to get this marriage certificate from Sharon. And that subject matter isn't banal, but they're kind of this kind of ongoing conversation they have about getting the marriage certificate. It's kind of banal, but it's handled in such a dramatic way. So there's just this interesting reversal where like the sort of dramatic and violent is handled in this banal way, and what is more banal is handled in this totally dramatic way. Yeah, I love her. So
I have never read her. Would you say that this novel is a good place to start with her, or if not, where would you recommend somebody begin with her oeuvre?
you could certainly start here. I also really love Self-Portrait in Green, which is more of a memoir, but like the strangest memoir you'll ever read in a good way. And then That Time of Year is another earlier novel by Ndaye that I really like, and My Heart Hymn Den. And this novel was published in the US by Knopf, but it's most of her works I've been able to get here in the US are translated by Two Lines Press, which is a press that I really love, based out of San Francisco. And I should say, like, I think all the books I'm going to talk about today are available in Canada through Penguin Random House. But like Brian Dillon, his books in the US are put out through New York Review Books and then Fitzcarraldo in the UK.
Do you have any interest in or aspirations to write in some other genre that you haven't tried yet?
Oh,
For
that's a
example, I don't know, poetry, drama. I mean, would you describe A Horse at Night as memoir? In a way, it is, but maybe not exactly. But
that to me, it's a work of nonfiction, which for me, I do write nonfiction, but it definitely felt like a whole different animal. No pun intended, because the title is A Horse at Night, but it felt so different to me in writing it. Like, I don't know that I'll ever write another nonfiction book again, but it's interesting because a couple of people have said that, like, someone asked me if I thought of it as autofiction, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I thought it was writing about fiction. It's interesting that someone could see it as having something in common, with my fiction, just because the process felt so different for me. But I did, when I first started writing, I wrote poetry. And when I went to grad school for writing, I didn't know if I would pursue poetry or fiction. I chose fiction, and I know that was the right choice, but I do feel like my fiction, because I care a lot about the sentence and language, has something in common with poetry. But I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever write poetry or write drama or anything like that. I often don't know what I'm going to do until I do it. Like I start to feel this, like I didn't think to myself, for instance, with the novel I'm writing now, like I want to write about love. It's just that I started doing it. And then I was like, oh, I guess that, so I could write in another genre, but I'll just have to see if I feel that urge.
you were talking about not liking starting stuff, so you moved away from short stories. So I'm just wondering if perhaps the novel you're working on now is going to be a tome. If you don't like
Oh,
starting stuff, then you're going to write a really long book.
I don't know if I'll ever do that. The short form, it seems to be my form. Yeah, the short book. It takes me such a long time to write the short book anyway.
And
Yeah.
then from your enjoyment of that book, I suppose a sentence, here is one of my favorite sentences from Indelicacy. Somebody, it wasn't me, but somebody started a thing on Twitter years ago called Sunday Sentence, where you just post your favorite sentence from your reading that week. And one of them for me, when I was reading Indelicacy, is this one. In books, I found even more strongly my desire to write back to them and their jagged, perfect words.
Thank you.
Sentence I loved.
I like
So
hearing that.
this is my wont. We're kind of wandering all over the place, but did you have any more books that you wanted to talk about that you've read or authors or anything?
I think I do want to just say something about one last book, and it's a book that's coming out in April. It's called Committed by Suzanne Scanlon. Scanlon has published two books before this. Her first book was called Promising Young Women, and it was put out by Dorothea Publishing Project. So I share this publisher with A Horse at Night and Creature. And her second book was called Her 37th Year in Index. And Committed, it kind of goes into the same territory as Promising Young Women, but that was more fiction, autofiction, and this is a memoir. And it's basically a book about her time as a young woman when she tried to commit suicide and went into the New York State Psychiatric Institute and stayed there for a number of years. And it chronicles that experience, but it's also very much about her coming to reading and to writing, to like a love of literature and to writing, and also takes up stories of other quote mad women and writers maybe who wrote about that. And so like Shulamith Firestone and Janet Frame, and she writes about Audre Lorde and Virginia Woolf. It's maybe one of the most profound books I've ever read. And she's a writer I wrote a little bit about her at the end of A Horse at Night. She's a writer I've already really loved. And you just see her in this book, like taking her subject matter so far. It feels like it transcends something. It feels metaphysical. Like I haven't really started talking to people about it yet. It doesn't come out until April, but I know I want to, because it's just truly one of these books that I think is so important. can't recommend it highly enough.
Well, that's a powerful recommendation. I vaguely remember the name from the end of, or from A Horse at Night, but I definitely need to investigate her more. I hope that will be coming out in Canada in April too, or shortly thereafter.
Yeah,
I'm not shy about ordering books from whatever country they're published in. So,
yeah.
Amina Kane, this has been a wonderful chat. Thank you for being so generous with your time, and thank you for your jagged, perfect words.
Well, thank you so much, Sean. It's so nice to meet you here.
Well, that was quite a get, hey? One of my favorite writers, Amina Kane. Oh my God, I was a little shy around her because I was doing my best not to just gush. But I think we had a good chat, so that was awesome. I haven't posted as many videos for the same reasons I haven't done a whole lot of reading. I have had put up one episode of Zooming In, one with Jolene of Bookworm Adventure Girl about who's the biggest bibliomaniac, and that was a really fun conversation from I think last October. I have such a backlog of these Zooming In chats in reserve, and I finally got a chance to edit and post that one with Jolene, and it was really fun, and it was really soothing. I mentioned last week I find it really soothing to edit videos. That particular conversation was so fun and friendly and bookish that it had an extra calming effect because it was such a great chat. So do check that out. And then I put up a wee book haul last night. And that's been it. And I don't have too much to check in on. I didn't finish anything, but I have gotten a ways into a couple books. At first I pulled out of the buddy read with Nicola and Mindy of this collection of essays by Jenny Diski. Why didn't you just do what you were told? Because of what's going on in the family. And then within an hour, I thought, well, they're essays. They're standalone essays. I could try to keep up or at least only be a little bit behind and read the standalone essays whenever I have the time and I'm in the right headspace to do so. And so I actually was only about 4 days late checking in on the first 5 essays, and I'm loving these essays so far. They were, I think, all or mostly published in the London Review of Books from the early 90s onwards, I think. Nicola is a huge fan. I think Mindy is too, but Nicola has been raving to me privately and urging me to read Jenny Diski ever since I've known her. And so that's why this buddy read is happening, and I can already see what all the fuss is about. I would describe her essays as, well, erudite, but in a way that it's really personal. She doesn't put too much of herself, unless the essay is a personal essay, like the opening essay is about moving day, where her ex is moving out, and she has a few days of solitude that she's been craving, and then she kind of has a bit of a... she gets what she wanted and then she doesn't know what to do with it type of experience, which was very relatable. But there's other essays that are basically review essays of a biography of Howard Hughes, a book about Jeffrey Dahmer, and what's that asshole children's writer, Roald Dahl, where there's just enough of her in the essays to layer it with some personal experience. And I am fascinated by what I've already grasped, what I'm already gleaning about her is that she's really funny, she's incredibly bright, and humane, or there's a kindness to her. So there's a couple instances in the essays where she kind of took exception to certain things that the person that she's reviewing the biography of, she didn't like the tone of the children's books by Roald Dahl, or other personal incidents that she reports where even though she realizes how uncool it is, she privileges kindness over any other reaction, and I'm appreciating that. I've got dozens of essays left to go. It's a big, fat essay collection. So far, I'm absolutely loving it. I was nervous to try David Carpenter's first work, or one of his very first works of fiction, because I haven't read much of his fiction. I've only read his nonfiction. I did read an early novel decades ago in the 90s. Don't remember it. I remember I liked it, but that's all I remember. And so I'm just nervous to try Jokes for Apocalypse, 2 novellas. The first novella is Loose, and oh my God, I'm really loving it. I don't think I'll say any more than that right now, but it is a childhood story, but there's 2 timelines. The boyhood of the protagonist and the adulthood where his marriage is in trouble and he's in the same summer cottage where he used to go with his parents when he was a boy. And so there's those two timelines, and there's a lot about fishing and perverted old men who were live next door and so on. Really funny, and something to do with the indigenous legend of Wendigo that is really fascinating as well. But the writing is to die for. And the last one I've started, and again, my buddy read of this with Heidi of My Reading Life is going to be a little loosey-goosey, depending on what's going on for me day by day, week by week. So we did put off the first check-in from last Monday until this coming Monday, and I have managed to read a few pages of this nonfiction book, A Free-Spirited Woman, The London Diaries of Gladys Langford, 1936 to 1940, and I love it. Now, it's a little bit opaque because I don't know much about Gladys Langford, but I'm getting a real sense of her personality. She was a divorcee in London at this time, a teacher. She had a lover. She was really intellectual. She was a big reader, loved the arts, really artsy-fartsy, really kind of cantankerous with lots of conflict in her personal life and her work life. That's all of it's here. Her writing is exquisite. And there are lushly detailed footnotes. The footnotes are sometimes take up as much space or on the page as the diary entries do, that give you lots of cultural and historical background. I expect by the end of it, I will have a real clear sense of Gladys Langford. I think I'm going to continue to enjoy it. And I am going to maybe start one book. I put in a request for it at the library, and it's a new release. It's a queer novel that just came out a few weeks ago, I think. How We Named the Stars by... God, I hate library stickers. Look at that. That's just rude. I can't read the author's name or on the side. Should be a law against that kind of crap. Andrés and Ordorica. I will double check the pronunciation later. A Mexican guy, or maybe a Mexican-American guy, goes to university and plot ensues. That's all I need to know. And the author is pretty cute. What do you think? Hope I like the book as much as I like the picture of the author. All right, that's all I have the time or bandwidth to say, but thank you so much for watching.